Hello, good evening, and welcome to another edition on Culture Radio FM 104.5. Wherever you are, however you are listening to the People Station. It's exactly 8 o'clock, and it's your usual program, Weatin Dae Monah U, in our local dialect, Creole, and in English, it's What is Bothering You? So keep it locked to Culture Radio for the next 2 hours. Today is Thursday, the 24th of April 2025. In today's edition, I will be talking to a special guest from the United States of America, and somebody that has traveled length and breadth of this art, Professor Dr. Peter Baofu. Today, that is of April 2019. Today is in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Doctor, you're most welcome to Culture Radio, Freetown, Sierra Leone.
So let me first say thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. So I've gone through a brief biography of yours, and we will be starting this edition by looking at some of your theories. But first and foremost, can you please officially introduce yourself?
You have introduced me already briefly, so maybe I can just elaborate a bit more. My name is Peter Baofu, and I'm an American missionary and author of 180 different books in all fields of knowledge, in the formal sciences, the natural sciences, the humanities, and the social sciences in relation to the mind, culture, society, and nature. And I have provided more than 150 different visions of the human future, again in all aspects of human life. And I have been in more than 159 different countries by now. And the reason I do that is because I want to understand humanity on the ground, not just in relation to one ethnicity, one group, one culture, one society, but about all humanity. Because I want to provide some solution to global problems, realistic one.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll come back to you. With us here again, we have the production manager of Culture Radio, Mohammed. Bangura. You welcome to Weatin Dae Monah U. What is bothering you?
Thank you very much. We are here to interview Doctor, one of the best professor in the world. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Continue to stay with me, and is going to serve as a co-presenter for this edition. So wherever you are, however you're listening to the People Station, Culture Radio FM 104.5. As I told you earlier on, with us this night we have Professor Dr. Peter Baofu, an author that is currently moving around different countries, and we are lucky to have him in Africa, Sierra Leone, Freetown. So let's go to some of your theories. Can you please outline some of these theories?
Yes, I have provided more than 150 different new visions and theories of the human future because I don't have time to talk to you about all of them. So let me just summarize them. All of these 150 different new theories can be classified into two big categories. One is meta theory, the other one is theory. Meta theory is about the foundation of theory, because any theory that you do has to have some assumptions, and those assumptions become the subject matter of meta theory. Theory, on the other hand, is important because no matter what you do in life, including the conversation that we have now, it also presupposes some theoretical framework. And even for those people who dismiss theory, are also slaves of theory themselves, except that they do not even know what kind of theory that they are assuming in what they are talking about. So in each category, I further subclassify them, let's say in relation to theory. I subclassify them in relation to 4 major subcategories, like in relation to the mind, nature, society, and culture. And in each of these 4 categories, I further subclassify them into different categories. For example, in relation to society, I also subclassify them in relation to social organization, social institutions, social system, social structure. By system over here, I'm talking about the social trends, for example. So, and then each of them can be further classified into subcategories. So it's a very comprehensive analysis of the totality of human life on Earth.
Okay, so this theory is the same theory you are lecturing in different universities you have went to?
Yes, I have been teaching in many different schools, universities around the world, and I have been on TV and radio stations around the world to propound some of the theories and missions that I have, so that other people can learn from that.
So can you tell us some of the universities you have taught some of these theories?
I have been in many different schools. I don't stay in any one school, and also in the US. I have taught in the US, I have taught in Western Europe, I have taught in the Middle East, I have taught in Central Asia, I have taught in Southeast Asia, I have taught in South Asia, I have taught in Southeast Asia. I have been in many different places, but I don't stay in any of them because my project is global. It's not based on one region, one locality.
So
remember, I'm a global thinker. I'm not a specialist in any particular region, culture, group, and all that. So it's very important for me to move around the world to understand all of them.
okay, so I would say you are one of the people that are fixing the world.
I'm trying to provide solutions which can be helpful to humanity to resolve many of the global problems that we have. Hopefully some of them could be very important for the future of humanity.
So let's talk about democracy. Let's talk about democracy because globally we are observing different policies coming from Asia, from America, Africa, that is affecting humanity. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, one of my major theories, 150 of them, and my visions, is what I call post-democracy. Now, what I mean is that democracy, as we understand it, will not survive, will not last anymore. It will be replaced by a new political system. I call that post-democracy. Post-democracy is to change some of the fundamental assumptions of democracy. In fact, this is a major problem because, let's say, at the end of the Cold War, I'm not sure if you remember that, in the 1990s, when the US won the Cold War, there was the end of history propaganda ideology in the US and also in the West, saying that liberal democracy and market capitalism will stand for the future. It will be the peak of human civilization. Now, I changed that assumption. I said that democracy will not survive because they have so many problems. It will be replaced by a new political system. I call that post-democracy. And also, capitalism will not survive also because of many problems that they have been produced. And I propose that it will be replaced by a new economic system. I call that post-capitalism. That is to change the very foundation of the basic institutions that we have been taken for granted. For example, to answer your question, what do I think about democracy?
But in our own African content, you talk about fundamental assumption of democracy. Now in Africa, can you outline some of these assumptions as democracy is concerned?
Yes, a good example is about governance. Governance is a very important concept of democracy because if you do not have a good governance, then the political system cannot produce the goods and services fundamental for the survival of that society, whatever it is. In the case of Africa, you go to many different regions and regimes, and you have a lot of bad governance. And in fact, the more you copy the liberal democratic framework, the more it will not work. It often backfires into different corruption. As you know, I don't need to lecture you about that. In Africa, I'm talking about sub-Saharan Africa, Black Africa. I'm not talking about North Africa, which is Middle Eastern, Arabic. They are not blacks, many of them. In sub-Saharan Africans, that is a joke, but that's also the reality too. Is that once a leader comes into power, he or she doesn't want to leave. They stay for a long time. Now that is a problem because many of those countries now they also call themselves democratic. In fact, not many political societies in Africa dare to say that their system is not democratic and they are proud of it. Of course, everyone is going to say ours is democratic. We are going to hold an election soon and all that, and promise you this and this and this. And at the end of the day, the new guys come in, the old guys disappear, and they will start doing the same thing again. Isn't that a major problem for democracy? You think in terms of the governance, you have so many political parties, and each don't tell you about something. And when they are in the opposition, they tell you one thing: vote for me, vote for our party. We are going to fix all the problems that you have. Once they come in, the same thing happen again and again and again and again. And this is a good example of politics is very corrupt, and there's a major problem in democracy. It's not just in Africa. You go to the U.S., the same problem. There's so much political corruption in the U.S. And look at the dysfunctional nature of American politics nowadays. So don't think that it's only for Africa. This is universal for all kinds of democratic system on earth, and that's what I'm challenging.
Before you continue, you mentioned the United States, and they are saying they are the father of democracy. And looking at Africa, a lot of global dynamics affecting the African continent. Do you think America is a country we need to admire or copy from as far as democracy is concerned?
There are two questions over here. One is about the father of democracy. The other one is whether the U.S. Political exceptionalism can be copied abroad. Let me answer the first question first, and I come to the second question. The first question is no, because democracy was not invented in the West, and certainly America is not the father of democracy. That is the problem about the history of colonialism, European colonialism, because the European colonial scholars, they rewrite history, and they often portrayed the beginning of democracy with the founding of ancient Greece, for example. But that's not true. Democracy was not invented in the West, and certainly was not invented in America. In fact, even before that, in East Asian civilization, let's say the Chinese one, even in ancient times, in ancient classics, they already spoke about different conceptions of political life, which have been ignored in the West, because the Western discourse on democracy is often portrayed white people as the people who invented democracy, and they don't look into the contribution by non-white people like black people or Asian people or some other people. And in the case of East Asia, for example, they require a larger contribution to the beginning of democracy. A good example is mandate, the notion of mandate. In a political system right now, which is democratic, the notion of mandate is important, because when you are elected by the people, you have to do what the mandate of the people who vote for you. So if the people here vote for you, and they say that they want you to do A, B, C, and D, that's your mandate of the people. So you're the elected leader, you have to do what the mandate asks you to do. But if you do not do that, for example, then the people have the right to overthrow you or vote you out. This kind of concept already existed in ancient China. The Western political discourse do not talk about that, or even when they talk about that, they dismiss that as non-democratic. But whatever is ancient Greece, for example, they often glorify that as the beginning, because during the colonial era, Europeans rewrite history and always portray everything, the beginning of all the invention, major political, economic, or whatever institution, they are founded, they are grounded in the West. But that's not true. So that's the answer to your question.
Okay.
America is certainly not the father of democracy, and the West is certainly not the father of democracy either. You have to look into the contribution of non-white people, which in the Western political discourse, especially since the beginning of the European colonial legacy, does not want to talk about that much. Now go to the second part of your question about whether the U.S. Political exceptionalism is going to be copied by other countries on earth. I always say in my publication, not just about politics, about economics, we can always learn from each other. Because just like you go to school, why do you want to learn from a teacher? I mean, you can just learn it by yourself, because when you interact with someone who knows something, you can learn something from that person too, just as the teacher can also learn from the students too. So in the case of politics or economics, whatever it is, of course you can learn from the US, but I think that the US has not learned much from the non-West. That is the problem over here, and that's why many times when the U.S. Politicians try to lecture Africa or in many other countries to do A, B, C, and D, and often they lecture to the point that they are patronizing, and they are not really trying to help you. So it's not just in the U.S., you also see many other major powers, they are doing the same thing too. So in that sense, I think that it's come to the point that look at the Trump administration right now and see the backlash against the U.S. all over the world. And that's a good example. And a lot of people now, I'm not just talking about the adversaries of the U.S., even the allies of the U.S. now, and trying to stand up and say we need to go beyond the U.S. if the U.S. does not want to help anymore. If the U.S. doesn't want to have trade, fine, we continue to trade without the U.S. Look at France, look at Germany, for example. Look at Canada, look at Australia, look at Japan, look at South Korea. All of them are saying that it's time to stand up, and we need to move on. Of course, they want to do business with the U.S. and consider the U.S. is the ally. But if the U.S. continue to behave like that under Trump, people have to move on. So is that a good example for you to say that everyone is copying? I think that everyone is trying to get away from it.
One of the issues we have now in Africa, especially Sierra Leone, is the withdrawal of the USA.
Yeah.
Many Sierra Leoneans are benefiting from that particular project, but now there's no more. Do you think this is some of the issues Donald Trump is doing to get control of the world of Africa?
There are two things over here. One is about Trump, and the other one is about America without or with Trump. Let's talk about America with Trump first. To understand why Trump is trying to eliminate the USAID and also with the consequences, not just to you but also in many other countries, and you have to understand the political personality of Trump. I have written some works, some publication on the political personality of Trump. Let me summarize that very quickly because I don't have time to talk about the entire publication. There are three things that you have to understand Trump in order to understand how to cope with him or how to understand him. Number one is that Trump is a transactionalist, which means that Trump, he will judge you not on the basis of any particular morality or ideology or human rights. He doesn't care about any of this. The way he evaluates you is to see what you can benefit him or the U.S. with his judgment. If you think that you are not giving back anything that he wants from you, then he will not help you. It doesn't matter what the morality is. Morality for Trump is not important. Ideology, compassion is not important. If you can die tomorrow, that's okay, you die tomorrow. He will not care about you because of his own compassion. Yeah. He cares about what is the interest that you can benefit him or the U.S. under his administration. So that's number one. Number two, you also have to understand that Trump comes from the far right. Trump is a ultra-conservative person. It's not always true in his career, but now he is very on the far right. That means that he believes in the ideology that America first. Not just any America first ideology, but America first, and America will do anything, including using force, to force you to do it, to bully you to do it. They will do anything to force you to do it. Okay, whether you like it or not, that's the far right ideology. You understand? It's not on the far left, it's on the far right. For Trump belongs to those group of people. They do not believe about competition. For them, competition is for losers. Do you understand that?
Okay. Yeah.
Let's say before that, Trump does not want to. Before that, the previous administration, they would like to trade with China, cooperate with China. But Trump is on the far right. So Trump now does not believe in competition. Trump believes in domination, in bullying. And that's why Trump imposed tariffs on everyone on earth and forced them to come to the negotiate table. And if you don't negotiate for a trade deal, we will do this to you, but no one likes it, not even the US allies. It's bullying, you understand me? And Trump even threatened that he might even take Greenland with force if necessary. Do you understand that? It's bullying, that's by force. It's not based on negotiation, reasoning, sober understanding of life. It's a question of force. So Trump belongs to this kind of far-rightist ideology. Competition is for loser. Domination, hegemony, bullying is the force of the day that Trump believes in. And number three, Trump is very impulsive and he is governed more by emotion. So whatever agreements that you have with him, he may be happy now, but he will come back and change it and ask you for more. So any concession that you have with him, he will come back for more. We have to understand the art of the deal, his book. You have to understand the way he negotiates. His negotiation is not to have a nice agreement with you and then we are going to live forever happy. First, he will ask something from you, force you to give the concession. Once you finish, he will come in agreement. But later on, he will come back to you and change again, ask for more. Blackmail is for Trump is always the beginning of more concession. So dealing with Trump, there's no end of any deal. He will come back to you. I tell you now, he's governed by emotion. If he's in a different mood tomorrow, he will cancel everything with you. He will violate all things. He asks you to come to the negotiate table with you and ask you for more. You give that to him. You are happy. You say, okay, that's the end. Now we are happy. Yes, for the time being. And then he will come back to you again. He made the agreement with Canada and Mexico for a new trade deal. Now he tore them apart. He asked for more.
Okay.
So this is the. So how can you make that happen? I think that is a major problem for Africa because you are very weak.
Yeah. Before Pessima comes in, I just want to ask you about the coming of the Burkina Faso president. Some of his approaches. Do you think is the kind of leader we need in Africa, going against the West policies and other approaches?
In politics, it's always about from the eyes of the beholder. Do you understand? Trump certainly do not like people in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, or the coup leaders because they chant the Western domination. And French, by the way, the French politicians, they certainly do not like what is happening in Burkina Faso, the coup leader, and also in Mali, in Niger. However, they may not like it, but the people there, those people who support those coup to overthrow the French colonial legacy, they love it, they support him. So in politics, remember, it's always a question of looking at the problem from the eyes of the beholder. Who is the person who is looking at that problem? So France, by the way, has been, just in case you don't know, have been organizing a lot of assassination attempts to kill that guy. And not just him, in Mali, Niger, and many other people. And France has been doing that not just now. In the colonial era, any African leaders that come up and challenge the French colonial control, they will come and get rid of you. So if you ask me, is that a good thing? I said that it depends whom you're talking about. From the standpoint of the West, no, they would do whatever they can to get rid of you. But on the other hand, for those people who support the coup leaders, they will support him.
Is that one of your vision as far as Africa is concerned?
I don't have a vision in the regard that you asked me because I don't believe in universality. Okay, I think that is what you are referring to. Am I proposing a universal vision? I do think that many of these conflicts can be resolved, yes, but we can pay on negotiation. But negotiation can only go so far because you lack the political power. So there are a lot of things that we can do to fix the problem, but that's not based on a so-called universal ideology that you may have in mind and say that am I providing a solution so that everyone on earth is going to abide with. But I do provide some visions, not in the sense that you have in mind, but in the sense that how the system itself can change over time such that it can make this kind of solution more feasible. A good example is what I just said, whole democracy. Another solution that I proposed, which I have not spoken about, is that I also written another book. I provide another new vision about global politics. More than 30 years ago, in 1995, I made a prediction that China would become the dominant superpower on Earth in a few years, and not the US anymore, not the EU and all that. And then a few years later, I make another prediction and another publication. I predicted that China and India will emerge as what I call the hyper empires, and the US, the EU, Russia, Japan, and all that they will no longer be in control. But it would be happen later on, and now things getting more and more into that direction that I'm proposing. And the name of the book is called The Future of Human Civilization, two volumes. And then the other one is Beyond the World of Titans and the Remaking of World Order.
So how will that be possible?
Say that again?
How will that be possible for China and India to surpass America, Russia?
How is that possible? Is your question?
Yeah.
It's just very easy. Just look at the indicators right now. Let's compare with China and the US as an example. Since 2014, many people do not know that. China had the largest economy in the world, not the US. Since 2014, we're talking about 11 years ago. Based on the GDP PPP, Purchasing Power Parity, published by the IMF and the World Bank. Okay, and the IMF and the World Bank and many other international organizations, including the United Nations, have been using many of those new data. Now, in the US and in the West, people keep asking, will China ever overtake the US as the largest economy? Because they don't want to face the reality. In the US right now, many people do not like to face the reality that the largest economy is no longer the US. Why? Because they focus only on the calculation in terms of nominal exchange rate. In economics, the term nominal means not real. They are not real. Nominal. Why? Because they don't look into PPP, which is the purchasing power parity. That is the real prices. Just like $1 in the US cannot buy you too much, but $1 in Sierra Leone can buy you more than what you can buy in the US or in New York City because of purchasing power parity. And that's why the United Nations and the IMF, the World Bank, when they publish the income per capita, for example, let's say in Africa, they have the original measurement which have been used for many years now. That is called the nominal exchange rate for the income per capita. But now increasingly they use the income per capita PPP by purchasing power parity. Then you can understand much better by let's say in Sierra Leone, PPP the income per capita in PPP is about $3,600 something in Sierra Leone. But if you look at the normal exchange rate, it's only about 800. You see the differences. So if you calculate this way, then the US is always the number one, but it's very misleading. But even then, even if you continue to use the exchange rate, the gap is always closing fast. So that's a good example. Another good example is look at the debt. Every major power on earth, remember the British Empire, the French Empire, the Portuguese Empire, the Spanish Empire, in their peak, all of these empires are often the creditor. They are not the debtor. But when they collapse, they are the debtor. Do you understand me? So the US, for example, right now has a huge debt. The US has the largest debt on earth. It's the largest debtor on earth. The US right now owns about $36 trillion or something like that. In another year, each year it goes up by maybe in a few years, it will be 40 trillion, so maybe another 10 years, I don't know, maybe 45 trillion. China just go to the opposite direction. China now is the largest creditor on earth. If you look into all empires, when they fail, They fell when they become the largest debtor. Why? The empire went broke. Do you understand? So you ask me how is that possible? There are many other indicators. I talk about economics. Go to the military, another good indicator. Look at technology. Look at DeepSeek, for example. Do you know DeepSeek? What happened in AI? No one could imagine that China could produce such a powerful chip or AI programming. Okay, so you ask how is that possible? There are so many indicators, even in the military. Right now, China has the largest navy on earth. Do you know that? No one knows that because you don't pay attention. We are the researchers. We pay attention to what is happening. I'm not the only person now who is talking about it. Many people now is already talking that China now is taking over. That's why. Why do you think Trump is so afraid of China? If China is so weak and America is so great as you think, then why are they so afraid? Because Trump understands that America is losing. China is taking over in many things already. It's got leading power already. It's not like in the future, maybe 20 years. But when I make a prediction in the 1990 or 1995, when I give presentation, no one believed me at all. Everyone thought that I was crazy. But now things are happening. I also made a prediction a few years ago too about the second Cold War between China and the US coming up. Again, when I make a prediction, no one pay attention to me. But now almost everyone is talking about the second Cold War.
Alright, Doc, let's talk about some of your visions and potential solutions. Now in Africa, we have problem about climate change, global warming, a lot of deforestation ongoing in Africa, including Sierra Leone. What are some of the potential solutions to address that, especially in Sierra Leone?
Climate change is not affecting Africa. Climate change is also affecting many other countries. Let me give you some solution because I was been on TV and people ask me about this in many different countries. Look at Oceania. They have the same problem. In fact, they suffer even worse than you suffer. I'm not sure if you know about geography. Do you know Oceania? Do you know what it is? There are some of the small islands in the Pacific Ocean between the US and Australia and East Asia. In that massive, vast sea, ocean, you have many different islands. There are about 40 different countries right now. Many of them, because they are tiny, they are small islands, not like you. They are very small. They are very small population. So every time when you have a global warming and the ice is melting or the water, the sea level is rising, you really flood a lot of people living near the beach. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So it's much more dangerous than you. At least you don't suffer that. Maybe the weather is a bit hot. So what is that solution? Well, I propose a lot of solutions to them. Some of them can be used also in Africa. One of them is to change your agricultural production. For example, when the climate change is become very hot for some production, you switch. Now instead of producing A, now you produce B. For example, I interviewed some farmers in Oceania. Some farmer told me that now we stop producing A because it's too hot. The crops die out very quickly because it's just too hot. Now they produce some of the crops which can receive heat. In fact, they can have multiple harvests each year. And those crops can turn out to be good for them. So they produce now, each island would have their own local production. So it's not that you have to copy them, but the technique is the same. The concept is the same. You can also nowadays in the US, in advanced countries, they use biotechnology. They change the genetic makeup of the crops. So that now, when it gets too hot, instead of dying, some of the crop can fight back because you change the genetic makeup. Do you understand me? So that's another solution to that. And then you diversify your economy. Instead of relying on banana or whatever you produce in agriculture, now you do manufacturing, you do services, you do education, you do whatever. Whatever is your local economic situation, that you can diversify. By the way, it's not just climate change. Some countries in the Middle East, now they're also diversifying. Look at Dubai. Dubai has been diversifying from the dependence on oil because they know the oil is not going to last forever. And now they are making some progress. So you can also do that too, because the same climate cannot change, cannot stay the same. And climate will change. By the way, this is not new in the history of the Earth. Climate change is not just human-made, also natural too. And there you have the larger changes over time on Earth. So and they have survived that. So there's another solution for us. And finally, many of those islands, they also unite together and work together. Why? Because climate change is not affecting one country. If you cope with the situation by yourself, then you cannot cope with that because it affects the entire region. So they have to stand up together and help each other so they can have sufficient resources, coordination together to cope with all this. So yes, you have many other solutions. It's not necessarily bad. And it can be wonderful if you can adapt and change. For example, so there's a quick answer to your question. It's not so desperate as you may think, but that is good.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Doc. Continue to stay with us here at Culture Radio, FM 104.5.
It's the People Station, Culture Radio, FM 104.5, wherever you are, wherever you listen. Tonight we are having Professor Dr. Baofu. Wherever you are, however you listen, you're still listening to Weatin Dae Monah U. What is bothering you? Let's come back to you, Doctor. Now let's look at these policies that are coming from the United States of America to Donald Trump. Will that affect the progress of Africa?
Does that affect what?
The progress of Africa.
The progress of Africa. Yes, in a way, but Africa is not a big trading power on Earth. Africa is not like China. Africa is not like the EU. They trade a lot with the US. Those are the big guys. So whatever they do to each other, it does affect in a major way each other. So will that affect Africa? Of course. We live in globalization, even though Trump tried to engage in de-globalization. But that's very self-destructive. And that's why I think that what Trump is doing is making America declining even faster. In fact, one of my observations can be very scary to you. But I think that Trump is making America so destructive that America is declining so fast because of Trump in a very scary way. America has been in decline. I talk about this in my book that I told you more than 30 years ago. So it doesn't surprise me. But when I see what Trump is doing, in a way it's very scary because America is declining so fast under him that the rest of the world does not have much time to even think about what do we need to do now without America. Do I think that Trump will make America great again? The answer is no. Why? Well, let me give you a few examples. I'm not sure if my discussion is becoming too technical, but I try to be a bit more easygoing so that you can understand something. Some of this economics is very technical. Okay, let's start first. Trump does not like trade deficit with other countries because he thinks that you are taking advantage of the money of the US. He doesn't like it. Now, what Trump doesn't understand is that if you get rid of trade, you are destroying the US too. Because look at China. In the last few decades, the US has trade deficit with China, but the US has capital surplus with China. The US has service surplus with China in a massive way, not just in a small. That's how the US have been balancing the book. Think about it. If trade deficit is so bad, you may ask the question: where does the money come from? How can the US continue to pay for this kind of massive trade deficit year after year after year after year after year after year? I'm not talking about 1 week. This has been going on for several decades now. How can the US pay for all of this? Well, there are several things. One way the US pay for it is because the US has a lot of service surplus with China, capital surplus with China. That means that many of the money that China has earned from the U.S., China reinvest back into the U.S. Side to finance the U.S. debt, like the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. bonds, corporate bonds, and all that. So China has been financing the U.S. to survive in the last few decades because of the trade deficit. So if you destroy the deficit, here is the problem, not just with China. I'll just give you one example. It's true for any other country on earth. The U.S. is an international reserve currency. It's an international currency. It's accepted everywhere. Why? Because the reason foreigners demand American dollars because they use them. Where do foreigners get American dollars? They have trade supplies with the U.S. That's where they get the money from the U.S. Now they use the money now to buy things, to invest, do whatever they like. And then so it's helping the U.S. to keep up the status of the American dollars as the international reserve currency. But now if you destroy that, foreigners now no longer have American dollars because you do not want to have any trade deficit with them. That means that they cannot have trade supplies with you. That means that they have no more American dollars to pay for everything. That means they do not need American dollars anymore. That means that the status of American dollar is exactly happening in the last few weeks, which scared the hell out of Trump. Trump finally understand when he imposed all these tariffs. Only in a few days, the stock market crashed. Now, normally when the stock market crashes, the bond market is doing better because in case of insecurity, people always invest into American dollars in the U.S. as safe haven. Now, Trump scared the hell out of the rest of the world. Many people are sell off. They don't think that the U.S. is a safe haven anymore. Now, the American dollars is losing value. The status of American dollars now is in trouble. For the first time for many years now, not only that we have the stock market crash, but we also have the bond market crash. That scared the hell out of Trump. Trump woke up and said, okay, we have a course of 90 days. Because Trump is destroying America. It's only 1 cent, but there are also manufacturing is another thing. Trump blamed China and many other countries to have trade supplies with the U.S. because they think that China and those countries take away manufacturing job from the U.S. What is happening is that the problem is not so simple. China has the manufacturing advantage. It's not because he's taking advantage of the U.S., but there are some fundamental economic progress that they have made that the U.S. has not. For example, cheap labor. China labor is so cheap. That's why the Chinese product, the prices are so cheap because they don't earn much of anything. American labor, the minimum wages can be $17, $18, $19 per hour. In China, it can be in some region less than $1. How can you compete? That's why you buy all this goods from China. You pay very little. It's not, but the problem is that China labor is no longer cheap anymore. But China now have the economy of scale because they have a massive country. That their economy now is even larger than the U.S. And that's why in economics, when you have the economy of scale, the prices will fall and your competitor will lose because now you are able to produce in a way that they cannot produce. And also, China have a complete ecosystem that they have done to produce in a way that the U.S. doesn't have anymore. Everything now in China can produce everything by itself within the ecosystem. They have complete supply chain. And when you have that, there's a huge advantage. The prices will fall. They mean that your competitors will lose because they don't have the advantage that you have. And also, Chinese workers now have a much higher skills than the U.S. on average. So now, when they are much more productive, that means that the prices will fall because they can produce more per hour than your competitor can produce, for example. And also, China has a command economy that the government plan every 5 years. They plan what is going to happen. The U.S. does not have this kind of planning system, and you lose in the end if you are not strategic. So there are many reasons why China becomes so supportive, such that even Africa now, look at Rwanda is learning from China and also learning from Singapore. Rwanda now admires China. try to copy China, and not only China, Rwanda in Africa, many other countries are trying to copy. Why? Why do they not copy the US? Because if you copy the US, you lose. That is a bad example to be non-competitive. No one is trying to learn from the US now. Everyone is saying what we can learn from China, because China has done all the things right in economics. So now if you want to fix the problem, you fix all this problem in the US, but Trump is not fixing any of this in the US. It just keep blaming on other people, bullying. That is the tragedy that I told you about his political personality. That is very self-destructive.
Okay, so we have a trade war ongoing right now. You understand that?
Yeah.
The trade war, America, China, the European Union.
Yeah.
So who is currently affected?
I think that it will hurt the US more than it can hurt China, because China is doing everything right, but the US is doing almost everything wrong. Let me tell you why. I'm an American, I want the US to win, but I'm a scholar. I have to look at the, I cannot just look at the mirror and deny everything, because then people will not listen to me and say, oh, you are no good, you just deny. So I have to look into the data. Let me tell you why. Number one, China now has a strategy. They will move on without the US. In fact, they have been doing this already ever since the first Trump administration. Do you remember the first trade war started by Trump? Not this one, the first administration. We are talking about starting in 2017, which will be like, okay. Since then, China has reduced trade with the US, because China understands that the US is not reliable. Okay, it's self-destructive. China made a decision at that time that we want to trade with everyone, but if they do not want to trade, fine. We trade with many other countries. That's only in the world. There are many other. There are more than 193 countries. If the US doesn't want to trade, fine. We trade with 190, for example. So if you look at the number of trade, I mean the economic calculator. I do not remember the up-to-date information. At that time, it was like 18% or 70% or 19% of the Chinese economy is trading with the US. But now the number has reduced to, I think the last number that I saw was like 11 or 12%. But they're still doing that. But that number, it was 2 years ago. I don't know what is the most current one. But this second trade war convinced the Chinese that we will reduce even more. So China is sending out the message. Xi just visited Malaysia and Vietnam, for example. And what did he do? He expanded trade with ASEAN. And also, China now is talking with the EU. Let's mend our difficulties. Let's have a new trade agreement. In fact, the EU has agreed after the Trump administration tariffs that they will send a new delegation, and the official of the EU, I don't remember her name, and they will visit China in July. Now, a few months ago, they didn't even talk. So nowadays, everyone is talking together. Japan, South Korea, China, for the first time in many years, they say, we want to have a united front on trade to deal with the US. Can you imagine this? Japan and South Korea are allies of the US, and they have not been doing well with China on many issues on territorial dispute. Now they say three of us need to unite together to deal with trade. Can you think about it? And Canada, by the way, just make the announcement by the new Canadian Prime Minister and say, we need to rely less on the US. We need to have some new trade agreement with the EU, with some other country. Trade less with the US so that they cannot bully us anymore. Mexico is doing the same thing. Think about this. Canada is an ally of the US. Mexico is also an ally of the US. Even your allies are now abandoning you. Think about it. So it is not just of the adversaries. So now, number one, China now is shifting away from the US. It doesn't trade much with the US anymore because they understand that the US is no longer reliable in trading, in finance. In fact, and another issue that China is very worried, and they have been working on it. China has the largest holder of US Treasury in the US, and I think they used to have more than $1 trillion. And the US have been threatening China and said that in case of any future conflict, we will confiscate those money, just as they confiscated the Russian $300 billion. But China has been learning from that. In the last few years, they have been shifting all this money out of the U.S. Now they shrink to the last number I saw is $750 billion. Many years ago, it was 1 trillion, and I don't remember. So they have been taking out slowly. Okay, they don't want to take too quickly because you make that very unstable. It's not good for the economy also. So, and also China now is expanding trade with Africa, by the way, with the EU, with ASEAN, with Latin America, and China has been repeating the same message. If the US does not want to trade, fine, we move on. And Singapore, another ally of the US, you need to listen to the speech by Singapore Prime Minister. He made a speech a few days ago, and he made another one. He said that that's what I have been predicting too. He said the world that we live in has collapsed. It's no longer the US dominated one. The US cannot lead that world anymore. That world is gone. That is gone already. A new world is emerging. And this new one, we have to go on. The EU just made another announcement, I think last week, and saying the same thing, that the old world that the EU, the Western Europeans have been depending on the US for national security is gone. The US is no longer reliable. We need to have our own defense industry, the national defense industry in the EU. And Macron, by the way, in France, have been talking about strategic autonomy already for many years, but now people are listening now more and more. Canada is doing the same thing. And African countries now are trying to trade more with China and some other countries. So to answer your question, how much does it affect? Because you don't trade too much. Number one, you also don't trade too much with the US now. China becomes the largest trading partner of Africa.